Welcome to Joe Stunner Boxing. You may have heard of the recent passing of James Cook, former super middleweight British and EBU champ. And this was a very special man because, as with Brendan Ingle and the Wickerbank Gym in Sheffield and Phil Martin and the Champs Camp in Manchester, this guy did an awful lot of good in the community. The community in this case being the East End of London. And his passing, it isn't just about remembering him for his ring achievements, which were considerable, but for what he did outside the ring. He was awarded an MBE, deservedly so. And terrific, a terrific addition to his community, and it'll be a poorer place without him. But people do forget, perhaps, what he did in the ring, which was, again, like I say, his achievements. He went above and beyond what was expected of him and what you would have thought he would have achieved when he turned pro. He turned pro in 1982. He won his first three, and then he lost a 6 points unanimous decision, I think it was. No, it wasn't unanimous. What am I talking about? It was the referee was a sole arbiter. So yeah, he lost a decision to Jimmy Price, who would go on to be a British title challenger. He got knocked out in a round by Harold Graham, but he did challenge for the British title. And James, his second defeat was to the same guy, Jimmy Price. It's just that in this case, he got knocked out in 2 rounds. Now, this was at middleweight, like I say. And then shortly afterwards, he went on he lost 4 out of 5 fights. And they were he lost to Tony Burke for the Southern Area middleweight title. He got done in 2 rounds. I think he'd already won that against Conrad Oscar, so he actually lost his title. That, like I say, that's the Southern Area middleweight title, not super middleweight title. He'd beaten Conrad Oscar, then he lost to Tony Burke. Then he had another couple of defeats. I can't remember against who it was. I think one of them was abroad. Might have been to Jan Lefebvre when he got stopped. And then a couple of fights later, he fought somebody called Mbayo Wa Mbayo, who a lot of you will, or if you're my age, you might remember him fighting Nigel Benn and getting done in 2 rounds, I think it was. That was a Commonwealth title win for Ben. But in the middle of those 4 defeats was a victory, an 8 rounds points victory over an undefeated fighter called Michael Watson. So you're talking about a guy in James Cook who'd been given nothing. I mean, no big push behind him, no big promoter. He was just turned pro in 82, floating around. 4 years later, he's on a losing streak, and in the middle of this losing streak is a victory over Michael Watson, undefeated prospect. At some point, in fact, I mean, like I mentioned, a Lefebvre fight, which would have been, Lefebvre was he was from the Netherlands, so that would have been in the Netherlands. James also went to Germany and lost a points decision over an undefeated fighter who would go on to be a world champ called Graziano Roccigiani. There were 2 brothers, Ralph Roccigiani and Graziano Roccigiani. But they were based in Germany. The name suggests Italian heritage, but James lost, I think it was an 8 round points decision in Germany. So to get paid, he was having to travel. And he was slipping into that journeyman mode, you know what I mean? But the win over Watson did raise a few people's eyebrows. And in fact, it ended up with him fighting Harold Graham for the British middleweight title, which was vacant. And Harold Graham, like I said, Harold Graham had knocked out Jimmy Price in 1 round. Jimmy had 2 wins over James Cook. So I can remember that fight happening, and Graham just completely toyed with Cook. It was completely one-sided. And Harold stopped James in 5 rounds. The referee, I don't think he was on the floor even. I think the referee just stepped in and said, enough's enough, because James wasn't able to lay a glove on him. And you thought, okay, he's found his level, area level maybe. The English belt was inactive at the time, so James couldn't fight for that. Then in his next fight, he beat a sort of past it, if you like, Errol Christie. And Christie had a big name. He never fulfilled his potential. He's a standout amateur. But he was very chinny, Christie, very, very chinny. And he got stopped in 5. He was on the comeback trail. James stopped him. And then he fought a guy called Brian Schumacher, who, again, a good domestic level fighter. He stopped him in 5 rounds as well. So, and then, back-to-back 5-round victories, Errol Christie and Brian Schumacher. But then he moved on to fight for the British super-middleweight title. And these were the days when the British super-middleweight title was not very old at the time. This would have been in 1990, and he fought a guy called Sam Story. And he stopped Story in 10 rounds. So suddenly, from out of nowhere, he's gone from being a guy who was staring down the barrel of being a journeyman to being a British champion. And it was a terrific win over Sam Story. Sam Story came in, I think, with 1 defeat on his record or something, and 12, 15, 18 wins, something like that. And on the back of that, he then got a chance to fight for the EBU title against a Frenchman called Pierre-Frank Winterstein. And this was in Paris. Winterstein was a Frenchman. Cook went over as the sacrificial lamb. He was the British champ, but he was on a great run of form, terrific run of form. And lo and behold, he knocked out Winterstein in the 12th and final round, and suddenly he was the EBU champ. So he's got the British and the EBU titles. Didn't ever fight for the Commonwealth. You slipped up there, didn't you, James? But no, he was British and EBU champ, and he was in the shop window as someone that had the belts and that people wanted to fight. And then his next fight, they put him in with Mark Kaler, and this was a defence of the EBU title. I think he gave up the British. Can't remember when, but he gave it up. So he fought Mark Kaler. Mark Kaler, East Ender, very popular fighter, had that epic brawl with Errol Christie, which he won. Knocked Christie out, but he was on the floor early. Kaler was. But he got stopped in 6 rounds by Cook. Kaler had seen better days, to be honest with you. He got stopped. That was for the EBU belt. And then I can't remember. I know he defended it one more time. I can't remember who against. The EBU title this is. And then he went back over to France to fight a guy called Frank Nicotra, who was, I think he was undefeated at the time, but he was being groomed as the next big French fighter. And of course, James Cook, having knocked out Pierre-Frank Winterstein, was well known in France. They took him over there to face Nicotra, and Nicotra caught him cold and knocked him out in a round. So we have, as usual, the old snakes and ladders thing. You work all the way up to the top, and then the snake eats you, and down you go. But it wasn't over yet. Not really for James Cook, because he licked his wounds, went back to Britain, strung together some, wins against not killers, but reasonable domestic level fighters. And then he fought, I mentioned the Wicker Man gym earlier, a guy from that gym, Fidel Castro Smith. Was that his real name? Probably not, but you know what? It might have actually been his real name. Because Brendan Ingle used to give his fighters some strange names, I think the only one he didn't rename was Nassim Hamed. Oh, Johnny Nelson, of course, as well. But yeah, it was expected that the shop-worn James Cook would lose to Fidel Castro Smith. This was for the vacant British super middle title. So again, this is a title that was formerly held by James Cook. He was expected to lose. In fact, he won very close points, 12-round points decision over Fidel Castro Smith. that was it. That would have been 93, because in 94 he then lost the belt to the much younger, much fresher Cornelius Carr, and that was a 12-round decision too. And that was his final fight. That was James Cook's final fight. But if you look at the man who started in 1982 and the man who finished in 1994, I mean, it's chalk and cheese. I mean, you talk about learning from your defeats and moving up through the ranks, and just being dedicated and working hard, and I mean, that was James Cook, and it is no surprise that he went on to be a teacher, not just not just a former boxer, but a big community teacher, because he had that work ethic, he had that discipline, he understood what it's like to be the underdog, he understood what it's like to be written off for no one giving you anything, and to keep fighting and battling. And eventually he reached, he never got a world title shot, but he was British champ twice and European champ. And what British professional is going to turn that down, to be a two-time British champ and an EBU champ? His final record, James Cook, was 25 wins, 10 defeats. 5 of the defeats were inside the distance. 14 of the wins were KOs or stoppages. No draws on his record. And yeah, a very, very underrated fighter who was, like I say, stopped 5 times, but by good men. Harold Graham, Nicotra was a pretty good fighter. But he was, at one point he was losing to people who were sort of area level, and then he scaled the summit, got to the top of the European Mount Everest. So yeah, R.I.P. to James Cook. Very good fighter, and an even greater human being. And yeah, have you got any thoughts? If you're an old fella like me, perhaps you remember James Cook, certain fights. Leave your comments below. Let's hear your memories of James Cook. I've had a couple of people actually in the comments I left a picture of James, just saying rest in peace, on the community page of the channel, and a few people had said that they knew James and that he had helped them when they were younger. Thank you for your comments, and if anyone else knew James or was helped by him, please leave your comments below, because I'd love to read them. Yeah, it's just such a shame to lose such a good person, but there we are. Originally from Jamaica, of course, James Cook, and then he was from Peckham. He lived in Peckham, in London. But, yeah, all right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video anyway. Just a little, a modest little tribute to James. If you did like the video, if you could hit the like button, and also subscribe to the channel if you're new, because we've got plenty more videos for you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks a lot. Enjoy your day, and bye for now.